to our Prabal Gurung store. It's just been 3 months since we opened. It's kind of like a full circle for me. When I came to America 20 years ago, my first job was with Cynthia Rowley, and her store was, this was 15 years ago, her store was right across the store, so just coming back here means a lot to me. But more than that, when we opened the store, I wanted to make sure the store was not just a transaction of clothes and money, it was a transaction of ideas. That was very important for me, and I'm really, really, really excited to have these 3 amazing, incredible women. I cannot even tell you, I was coming here from work, and I was thinking and looking at all the work that they've done and who they are and what they stand for. And and I've always been a person who grew up with strong women, my mother, my sister, and just to be surrounded by these women, strong women from fashion, it's just an honor and privilege. So I really want to thank 3 of you very, very much, and to all of you. Also, the reason why I wanted to do with CIRKEL, with Charlotte here, like the intergenerational, like this conversation was, I think it is ours is an industry that is very impressionable, like people look at it and all stuff, and I think oftentimes we are such in a hurry and chasing the youth and what's new and everything that we forget the history. Even the new, even the latest thing had a history, or they looked at some kind of history. And so I just want to make sure that while we are celebrating the youth and all that stuff, that we don't forget who opened the doors for us. With that in mind, I'm just going to hand it over to Charlotte. So go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Charlotte Japp. I'm the founder of CIRKEL. CIRKEL is an intergenerational networking platform, and it's all about bringing people of all different ages together, just like we're doing right now. And we're talking about cultural events. Fashion is what we're talking about today. I started CIRKEL because I realized that we really do live in an age-segregated society, and even as a young person, I felt the consequences. So I started my career at Vice Media. The average age is 28 years old. My boss's boss wasn't even 40 years old, so there was a very limited pool of experience that I had available to me for learning and guidance and growth. But lucky enough, I was living with my parents at the time, just uptown, and having them, I was able to ask a lot of the questions that I wanted to ask my managers at work, but they didn't really have the answers for me. So I brought them to my parents, and both of my parents, like many Americans, were aged out of their jobs and careers at about the age 50. And they were reimagining their careers, like many people are. This is a reality that everyone can relate to. So in exchange, I was actually teaching them a lot about what's coming up, who are the new artists, the new trends, what's new. And it was really amazing to have these breakfasts and these dinners. And the timing actually couldn't be better for CIRKEL and for us having this conversation, because this year, 2019, marks the first time that there are more people above the age of 60 than there are below the age of 18. Let that sink in. Wow. More people above the age of 60 than under 18. So there's a lot of experience, life experience, professional experience out there in the world, but we're really not making the best of it, and it's sort of not going to use if we're not having these conversations. Our past events at CIRKEL have covered publishing and tech, also very ageist industries, and here, like Prabal said, we're talking about fashion, and fashion is a really referential industry. Everything is building on the past. I love thinking about the Met Gala and how it's all about referencing that art and the history in those walls. So, it's really about making sure that we're listening to the people who experienced it firsthand, and getting as much knowledge through them as possible, and having the conversation in both ways as well. A couple housekeeping things. After our amazing panel that I'm so excited for tonight, we're going to do a networking exercise called the Circle Game. And you'll be given a little piece of a circle, and you'll have to find the other matching 3 quadrants from the same circle and make some new friends. Our hashtag tonight is CirklePG, CIRKELPG. And if you'd like to buy anything, we're doing something special and I'm very grateful for it. 10% discount and 10% goes to encore.org, which is a nonprofit that helps adults over 50 regain employment through volunteer opportunities.
Oh, wow.
With that, I would love to, yes. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. First off, over here we have Bethann Hardison, a living legend. Was a Brooklyn girl, which I love. Yeah. She started her career in the 1960s, modeling, and by the 1970s she became one of the first black women to walk the catwalks of Europe, most notably at the Battle of Versailles, where French and American designers were battling it out at Versailles. By the 80s, she had started her own modeling agency and worked with talents like Tyson Beckford. And since then, she's been a real voice for inclusivity in fashion and has been doing amazing work in that space.
You're the only one who's ever got any of that right.
This is the reason why I love her. All right.
Okay, next up. Down the line, we have Michelle Lee. Michelle is the editor-in-chief of Allure magazine. And since her time working there, she's done amazing things to bring more representation, especially for Asian American women, and has put more Asian American women on the covers of Allure than any other editor before. And my favorite thing about Michelle is that she has banned the term anti-aging from the vernacular of Allure. It's an authority and duty, so anyone who's walked down the aisles of Dwayne Reed knows how common that language is. And next up, we have Lindsay Wagner. I love Lindsay's story because it's really circular, pun intended. She started off as an intern at Teen Vogue and then went on to work at places like Style.com and The Cut. And there was a really pivotal moment for you at The Cut where she interviewed 100 people of color about what it means to be black and working in fashion.
It was the most powerful.
It was.
And then after that, she went on back to Teen Vogue, where she's now the editor-in-chief. And lastly, our host and our moderator, Prabal Gurung, who lived in many different countries. He's from Nepal, but he came to America and built this brand from the ground up with total control of the creative output, which is really amazing. So not only is everything you're seeing very beautiful and coming from this brain, but his messaging is also about inclusivity in the industry. And if you've ever been to a fashion show, which I'm very lucky that I have been, you'll see there are age-positive models, there are trans models, there are models from many different countries, many different races and ethnicities. It's an amazing sight, and if maybe in the future we see more of that, I think we'll be in a better place.
Yeah, right.
And I'm going to go off to the panel, chat with you later, and thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great.
You should be the one moderating this. But what I wanted to do was, I have all these questions and everything, but as Bethann was saying earlier also, I think let's just have a conversation. Let's free flow wherever it goes, and then, you'll be the one who's leading it, mainly. So let's start. I mean, she's my hero. She's my hero. So since this is an intergenerational, conversation, I just wanted to talk about, how everyone talks about how difficult it is to break into fashion, right? Like, let's talk about what it was like for you? What did the industry look like then, when you started, compared to what it is now? And any differences, any highlights, great moments, not so great moments for all three of you. So let's start with you.
I'll start with it because I didn't start in the fashion industry. I grew up in the garment district, which is the apparel industry, which is quite different than what you all are maybe lean towards or impressed with. The industry of the garment district is quite different. I needed a job, and back then you looked in the New York Times and you looked in the classified section. There was an opening at a button factory, and a custom button factory, and I went there and I got the job. In the garment district, it's quite different in that time frame. So I'm not smitten with the fashion industry like you all are. In fact, I'm not smitten at all. So my journey, I'm happy to say, I come from the garment industry, and I'm very proud of that because it taught me a great deal. And so because of that, you did have what you didn't have. I had mentors. I had people who believed in me. I had people who encouraged me. I had people who told me I should, I get on a runway. And then I had a full-time job as I did runway. And I worked in companies, and they let me go to Europe because as long as I could do as an assistant designer to make sure the collections were complete, I had support all the time. I came from a Jewish background. I'm a black kid. And at the end of the day, that's my family. So the education you get then is not what you get now. So we had no fear of losing a job. You can do the job, you get the job. And there were times I couldn't do the job because I messed up. But that was in my youth.
So what would be, I would say, as you're explaining, what's the one difference, like major difference that you say from then to now, whether it's the garment industry or it's the fashion?
I think the difference is that everyone thinks that they sew a button on a shirt, they're in the fashion business. I think that's a great difference, and I keep trying to tell young people who want to be in the apparel industry to please reference it as the apparel industry. If you look at it that way, you'll have much better and a longer life. Fashion is determined by others. If you have a certain skill, if you have an ability, and you are determined, and you can go through the ranks, you can stay in the apparel industry for the rest of your life. That's not true if you're in the fashion industry. As you can see and smell, notice, people come and go. And you have to suck up. There's nothing to suck up in the garment district, and now the garment district is no longer as it was.
Yeah, we feel it. Michelle?
Yeah, so when I was starting out, it was in the late 90s. And I think in a lot of ways, it almost felt more straightforward back then. So for me, being in fashion and in media, when I graduated college, I think that my perception of companies like our company now, Panelist, was that you had to know someone. So it was either that you belonged to a family in which you know someone to get your foot in the door, or you went to an Ivy League school. I had neither of those things. So I think that for me, I had no idea how I was actually going to get started.
But you just love fashion.
I loved fashion and I loved writing. So for me, it was really journalism more than anything. So I went to college down in Florida, so furthest place away from like New York City. I don't know anyone who works in media. So my tactic was really just work as hard as you possibly can. So I think that that's something that over the past 20 years of my career has really taken me far. Has just been stay hungry and just make sure that you work twice as hard as anybody else, because no one's going to be handing you things. So nowadays, I feel like it's different though, where at least in journalism, there used to be a path, right? You would graduate from journalism school, you become an assistant, you become an assistant editor. There's sort of a path upwards. Nowadays, I think the amazing thing in both media but also in fashion is that there's so many different inroads to get in.
But I want to say, adding to what she just said too, it isn't so much that she wanted to be in fashion, she just needed to be in an industry that she could do, which is journalism.
Yep.
Yeah.
And the same thing with me being in the garment district. People say, well, you're of course you know how to dress because you were a model. I go, that's so stupid. It just so happens that something you can do leads you to a certain industry. And that's what I think is important to say. So for people to stop smelling that one, this word fashion.
Got it. All right, no fashion.
That's a really good point, because when I was young, I didn't know what fashion was.
Yeah.
Like, what does a fashion editor do? So actually, when I was on the plane from Florida, moving up to New York to go work at Glamour, I had in my mind that I wanted to be a fashion editor. I had no clue what it was. Exactly, and I actually feel, so I have 2 kids now, and I feel like during career day, they need to actually just teach them what everyone does.
Yeah.
They're not teaching them the basics, as opposed to, I'm like, I want to know what a fashion market editor is.
Do you guys, are you talking about Condé Nast or like the
Just in general.
Yeah, okay,
I think like
okay.
in general now, I think because of social media and
Yeah.
like media in general in Hollywood, people probably know more about the ins and outs of the fashion world as opposed to back then in the late 90s.
There's only a few things, you know, you're a stylist, you're an editor, you're a model, you're a designer.
Yeah.
And also the landscape of fashion, I mean, the publishing has changed, you know, so, I mean, do you think those roles that, you know, like how you market it and all that stuff, like, I mean, have you seen it changing or?
Oh, it's
Yeah,
so different. So that very first job that I had when I was at Glamour, there, the editor-in-chief at the time was a woman named Ruth Whitney.
Yay,
Who
Ruth.
but I think about how different her role was back then than my role is now. And it was very much, you had the one thing, you had the magazine, and it was super important, obviously. But your one time that you had to communicate with your audience directly was through your monthly editor's letter. Now, we're like on Instagram story, we're tweeting, we're doing other things. The whole job is so different from just a touch point perspective, but then also just in terms of what we have to manage. It's magazine, it's digital, it's social, it's video, it's other businesses, it's events, it's licensing, it's so many different things, which I actually think is a really exciting part of the job.
Do you want me to start with my show?
I mean,
You're looking at me, you're giving me a look. Yeah, I mean, when I started into fashion, I just didn't really also know what I was doing. I'm from Wisconsin. I didn't know anybody in fashion. I really just got into it by cleaning the Teen Vogue closet, and I was like, oh, this is fun. I should totally do this.
Get the job.
One of my advisors was like, she found this site called Edge 2010 that I don't think they were posting. I don't know if they post anymore. But they needed a free intern to schlep. And I mean, for me, the breaking into the industry was always hard because I felt like people weren't really transparent about the need for economic stability and those connections. When I moved here to New York, like I was very clear with my parents of like, okay, like I know like this is not like a job that has a blueprint. Like I'm coming out here, I don't know anybody, I could completely be poor tomorrow, but like this is what I really want to do. And so I just hustled, and I felt like that was something that was really hard, and something that I'm trying to do with the Teen Vogue platform is really have that transparency with young people of, you know, how you get to places, how people are actually able to fund things, because I do feel like a lot of times when people are like, oh, well, how were you able to get this job or get that job? It was like, at that time when I started at Teen Vogue, I was changing mannequins at the DKNY store. I was working at a Jewish restaurant on the weekends. I was always like freelancing for somebody's shoot, like carrying some rag, like hitting myself in the head. And it hurt so bad. But like I was always doing like 8 different jobs to try to make it work. And I feel like you just have to, people don't really like prepare you for that. I feel like they kind of show you the great, like, oh, this is fun, like that party was great, like that's cute, but they don't really show you the wherewithal that you have to really sustain yourself.
Okay, what was your interest when you first started? What was your
I just wanted to write, and I wanted to style, but I didn't, but I was like, I have to get my foot in the door, and at the time, it really felt like, I think it felt for me like old school fashion in the sense of everybody that I was around either came from money or had a trust fund or knew somebody in fashion, and we were all making $9 an hour, and there were girls wearing Chanel every day.
family, that is true. In the magazine publishing world, for sure.
Did you, I mean, was it so apparent to you, to both of you, and to you as well, like when you went into, maybe then, in publishing when you went there and you really realized, as you mentioned, you know, like the trust fund kids and the disparity, like, was it?
Oh yeah, it hit me, and I was really emotional about it for a really long time, because I felt like even though I worked harder, stayed later, had better ideas, it wouldn't matter. I felt very just like this is never gonna happen for me because I don't have these connections.
And when did that shift for you? When that, you know, that clearly now you're the editor-in-chief. of
Oh,
Teen
but
Red.
honestly, it only shifted when I stopped caring. When I was like, whatever, like I'm gonna.
Was it, like, how, do you just like? I'm just curious about it because we've all been through that,
Yeah.
right? And I wonder like what your experience was. Was there a particular moment, something that happened? You were like, you were like, okay, I don't care anymore.
I think with time and as I got older, I just felt more confident, and I felt like I just always had something to say, and I felt like I always had a different point of view. I felt like, I mean, when I interviewed Bethann, it was so fun because we were actually talking about real things and real issues, and I feel like a lot of times in publishing, people talk around things a lot, and we were just able to be like, yeah, this is horrible, like, this is crazy. And I think when I realized, like, look, like, I have really important things to say, and I really want to make changes, and if I spend so much time, like, focusing on the things I don't have, I'm never going to fulfill my purpose and do the things that I know I can really do. Once I started to do that, I think my work just started to reflect that, and got better.
That's amazing. I mean, like, yeah. And do you want to? Do you have any? Yeah.
I really started to see a change in the past 3 years, and I kind of marked that from my time that I started at Allure. So in my time I started at Allure, I've been there for 3 years, and 3 years ago, publishing was not diverse in any sense of the words. The hiring was not diverse.
Or fashion in general, or fashion.
Fashion was not diverse at all. Right. Yeah. Runways were not diverse. Who we covered on the actual magazine covers was not diverse. And then my second year there, we started changing that quite a bit, and obviously the world started coming around and everything else.
This is 3 years ago?
3 years
Right.
ago. It's only even been, to be honest with you, like I lose track of time totally, but I'm like, even in the past year, how far we've come. And that's the thing that makes me really excited. But I think that when I was first starting out, I was regularly the only non-white person. And in a weird way, I think that it did this thing to me where I tried to fit in, right? So you kind of were like, I'm just gonna like assimilate here. But then as time went on, I realized that it's my greatest asset is being different. And I think that that's something where obviously now a lot of people understand that. It's been this weird transition for me over the past 20 years.
Also, I want to ask you a question too. So being the non-white in the room, do you often find when you, not being, say, the editor-in-chief, do you often find that maybe when you speak up to make a change of thought or direction of how someone feels about something, where the majority is going one direction, do you have the ability to be able to push past and not be looked at as, oh my God, here she goes again?
Right. I don't know. I don't know.
All the time.
Yeah, I don't know. I think early on in my career, when I was like very, very junior, I don't think I'm revealing anything amazing here. There are certain people in fashion who are real assholes, right? I don't know if they were being an asshole to me.
You're being very careful by saying certain.
I don't know if they're being an asshole because I'm not white, or if they were being an asshole just because that's like how they were. So I think I have a hard time looking back and figuring out what it was. But I definitely felt like some of my ideas were not necessarily given the weight that they should have. But again, for what reason, I'm not sure. Right.
I mean, I think I've gotten the looks for years now, even when I was like in a senior position before this. But I feel like it's honestly, I don't know. I honestly always would give people like an explanation of why I'm saying something. Like I don't want you to think that I'm just saying like, hey, we really need to cover this person because I really like them. Like I'm saying like this is really the smart thing to do because this is part of culture and like this is where we should be going. But I think, I mean, whenever I would get pushback, I'm like, well, I mean, it's your loss. Like if you want to be behind and like you want to be fake woke, like go over there. Like, I don't fake woke.
What is your age?
28.
And what is your age?
43.
Okay, so this is very interesting, because it's interesting with younger people, like when you speak about your time frame, that there's a youth between, that's 21 and below, how they don't let anything stop them from doing anything.
Yes.
They don't imagine that they can't do something. You're closer to that age. That you know, after a while, you just, well, I'll start my own. And they do it at 14, 15, 16, 17, because they're that generation that they have no reason to think they can't.
Absolutely. You can have a 18-year-old nephew, and you know if I may, like, and he came out when he was 13 years old, you know, and he's lived his life like authentically and just without any care, you know, and so just to see that kind of, you know, at 13 and now at 18 he goes to Barnes, like, and just like, having that conversation, all of a sudden I'm learning so much, you know, yeah. So, lost my chain of thought. No, but in terms of like, what do you think shifted? Because I'll tell you, I mean, as a designer, as a fashion designer, like, you know, whenever I've always been passionate about issues because I am a minority myself, came as an immigrant to America, knowing no one. And, you know, like, I really worked my ass off to get wherever I am, you know, a long way to go still. And whenever I spoke up about lack of diversity, and more than that, also lack of inclusivity, and just calling out on things, I was often directly or indirectly or via DMs or emails asked to shut up.
Yeah.
You know, constantly. And you know, and when we're talking about race, I'm not trying to vilify anyone, but always often like my folks. You know, because their experience is completely different. So, what do you think shifted in fashion? Like, I know, that, you know, there's trailblazers like you. Then we have James Scully, you know, who's always like spoke up, and you know, we are still a minority. We're still a minority in our industry. In fashion, I'm not talking about apparel. I'm talking about fashion, right? And what shifted, you guys think?
Well, with you, for instance, I'll question you. You would have casting directors and stylists tell you that you shouldn't use this girl or that girl, because there were a moment where your shows didn't reflect your philosophy.
Of course.
And it was, I had to keep saying, this has got to be because somebody is saying, no, you don't want to do
No,
that.
100%. Because you know when
You don't want to do that. You don't want to open with a brown girl. No, you don't want to have that.
Always. I mean, I remember like my fifth show, I opened with an Asian girl, and it was like a big fight, you know, to open with an Asian girl, to open with Joan Smalls, you know, it was a big fight. And then not only that, you know, because, you know, I started my business, it's going to be 10 years, I was working at Bill Blass, I had a little bit of savings, and I went on unemployment, and the government paid for my, you know, survival, and the government was good then. And I went on a lot of dates. So, but you know, jokes aside, however, it was, as Michelle said earlier, a lot of it was also, I knew that I was the only person from Nepal who was in fashion in New York, right? And I wanted to represent that, but I also didn't want to be branded as that ethnic designer, you know, or that, you know. So I kind of wanted to, So it was also that, you know, whenever there was a collection in the beginning that showed any kind of my heritage, it was panned, right? And then whenever it was like a double-faced cashmere coat in a beige color with a gray, like, you know, cheap dress and like a white, then it was like on a blonde girl, it was like perfect. You know? So it was like, oh my God, that is luxury. And I didn't understand. It took me a lot. And so it was a couple of years ago I stopped reading reviews, and I have friends, you know, like I have friends with other designers, and we talk about it a lot. And a lot of us, like minority designers, we talk about our experience. So I know, like, from my experience, I know where it has changed and where it shifted. But I wonder in publishing, because as a designers, we have our runway shows and now our Instagram, right, and all that stuff. As a publishing, like magazines and everything, you have, I would say, if not bigger reach, and the way you influence little girls. You know, my niece who's like 13 years old, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, things are changing in the right direction. But like how has it shifted and why?
I have a really nerdy answer to that with publishing. So part of it is because newsstand sales for magazines don't really matter that much anymore, or they matter less than they used to. So when I was first starting out in publishing, there was this unwritten rule, I guess, and people used to say it in the office. They didn't want to say it in certain words, but it was basically if you talked about a certain cover star who was not white, they would just say, oh, that won't sell.
Yeah.
Right, and it was always that it was like, you know, you live and die by the newsstand. It has to sell on the newsstand. So people didn't want to take a risk on anyone who was like outside the norm. So nowadays, because newsstand doesn't matter as much as it used to, people are willing to take risks. But I also think the other thing that changed is success. No. And by us showing, you know, this actually is something that the audience wants. It's been a snowball.
Don't give yourself any credit. What really changed is popular culture. So does popular culture. Our industry, the industry of fashion, lost its control. They began to reflect society, popular culture. Once they started reflecting, because they didn't feel the strength, by new scan, they didn't feel that anymore. They started relying on what was outside. So that's anything from music, film, anybody's tennis stars, whatever, anything that's popular, they went for that. They no longer kept the what we used to call the little elitist island that we used to live on, which was fashion. We didn't need outside people in our industry before, but now it is all about the outsider. And once the outsider became reflected, the outsider had the power, then you had to start to, so now that could be black, most of them are black, that could be Latin and Asian, but believe me, it's fair game now. It's not because it won't sell, because right now, it's on anything.
I think for me it was a twofold of, I think when people started to realize that we can call out someone and say, hey, like you know, you're in this position, you should be doing X, Y, Z, that whole culture really shifted things where we can say like, yes, there needs to be, you know, more inclusivity on all ends of hiring, but like the people that are, you know, that do get this seat at the table, they need to be using that platform for good and not get to that seat at the table and be like, oh, like I'm scared or I don't really want to do anything. And I feel like, I guess an example for me, she won't mind, is when I was at New York Magazine, I wanted to shoot a lot of different people, and a lot of times our advertisers would be like, oh, no, this person really isn't on brand, or like, you know, this person really isn't our aesthetic, and yeah, and it, you know the phrases, and a lot of times it'd be like, okay, but this is somebody that people really care about, this is somebody that like everyone is talking about, and so I would just go around them and do it anyway, and I would just find different ways to shoot people, and because I felt like, you know, I just didn't want to wait for fashion or these brands to uplift somebody and say they're cool enough or they're good enough when I already know that they are.
And the fact of it is that what you're doing by doing that is that you're really helping them out. Because at the end of the day, they don't know. They're just basically going by the yellow brick road. And you don't have that. You don't have that yellow brick road. All you know is what you know in your time frame. That's what's so good about being young.
Okay, so as leaders, you know, both of you are editor-in-chiefs, you know, so what steps do you take, or what are your plans to make the industry more inclusive? It's not just diverse, you know, I always feel like diversity is a term that is used to make everyone look, you know, the company or brand or magazine or whatever, look good in front of the public. Inclusivity is an idea, and not just an idea, an action that literally seat at the table, behind the scenes, everyone, we all live by it. So what are your?
I mean, what you were just talking about is one of my big fears, is that I see it within, so Allure is very large in beauty, although we do play with fashion and culture and other things. But within the beauty space specifically, I think there are a lot of brands right now that I see, and I think the same thing is true with fashion too, where people are kind of patting themselves on the back, and like, we are so diverse now, aren't we amazing? And then you're kind of like, well, not really. And I think that, you know, for us, we've had a great 3 years of where we won Ad Week's Magazine of the Year last year, I won Editor of the Year, and largely because we had these amazing, really diverse covers. And I think part of it has been, once we even opened our eyes up to what like an inclusive magazine is, what an inclusive brand is, it kind of opens your eyes to how much more you can be doing too. And I think that it is a good point that diversity is not just ethnicity, it's not just skin color. It is for us within the beauty world also things like, one example I've been saying to people is that for decades, women's magazines have been writing about acne. But if you look at the image that goes along with that story, it's someone who has beautiful, stunning skin. You never actually see the acne. So we did a story last month where we were like, we're gonna shoot a girl who has a lot of acne and actually show it. And it's just normalizing certain things like gray hair, stretch marks, something like things that I think some of us just never knew actually existed because they were always photoshopped out of existence.
So you did a girl that had acne in a sort of like beauty story and you didn't mention it?
We did mention it, but I think that is the next phase of where we want to go with just being inclusive is that, you know, to me I feel like the future of things is if we're shooting a trans model or something, we're not mentioning that it's a trans model.
Wow.
We're shooting guys, right? But I think
We don't
that's
want to be trans, you didn't mention it.
it's a little bit. I think that's the phase where it's like,
But
wow, different.
no, Here's the thing, but I do think, I don't know much, I mean, I do feel it's up to an individual. You know, some of them want to, they can come across as, they can, hoping that people won't recognize them. Some of them are very proud of the fact that their identity, you know
well,
what I mean?
that's if they're proud and they,
Yeah.
you know, if you mention it, they say, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
But normally the whole point of being trans is that you are identifying as transition and you're trans, right?
It is, but I do
But
think that
you're
there.
talking about for the public.
Yes,
You need to
exactly. I
help the
think
public.
there's a thing happening right now in publishing. It's sort of what I was saying too about like everyone patting themselves on the back. That they're sort of doing this thing of like, you know, we're gonna shoot all people who have disabilities or something, and it's a disability package, which is a very like great thing. But I think that the next phase of that then is if we're shooting a hair story, we have someone who has disabilities and they're just in that story as well. So I think that to me, like when I look at the future of what it should be, that's I think where we're probably going.
Magazines really have a thing now because at the end of the day, they have to reflect their audience. And
Yeah,
their
for
audience
sure.
now is pop culture. It is who it is in society.
I mean, so many things. I can't. It's gonna give me a headache. Things. I try not to get ahead of myself because there's like so many dreams, so many things that you're like, oh man, I gotta fix that. How do I fix that? And but I mean, as of right now, in like my three-month mark, the thing I've been focusing on is how it just starts with me and my team. I think one of the annoying things that I've seen at other publications is that they will like have an all-white staff, like actually on staff, and then like freelance out pieces to people of color to like, oh, like this person, like Kendra came out with an album, like you can write that review or like whatever, but they don't actually give people of color, you know, leadership roles and actually decisions day to day on how we're talking about things that are happening. So that right now, as I'm staffing up, like that's so important to me because I think it starts with me and like the people that I hire and are on my team, and I think we actually have the most diverse team at Conde. That's where my focus is right now because I think that affects everything that we do. So
It would be good if you had like a young white kid go out. No, really sit with it. I think, I mean, this is my point. I'm trying to change the world. I think you should have the white kid, the young white kid, go out and do him. See, and have the black kid go out and do the opera.
I think everybody's open to do everything. Like
However, you know, it's oftentimes
Education.
yeah, it is, but oftentimes it also becomes about you know, whether the subject that is being interviewed and the managers and the space is welcoming to the person, of the other person. That becomes a big play, you know, here. And I think oftentimes that's, and it's also, I also feel like, you know, a lot of, you know, people of color, and we don't have enough, we haven't had enough opportunity to share our experience through, let's say, someone we adore or like, you know, admire or respect. So I think that time will come. You
Well,
know,
I think
you know.
that time was, I mean, let's not get it twisted, this ain't brand new for us.
Yeah.
I mean, we had been there.
Yeah.
I mean, there was nothing, people ask me all the time, was it such a struggle for you? Always been such a struggle. And it wasn't a struggle for me.
No.
Heads of state, so to speak. You know, another way of putting it. Like the Wizard of Oz was no longer, you know, the Wizard of Oz became. And I used to call this one particular editor-in-chief the Wizard of Oz, and y'all can imagine who it might be. And don't ask me. But the fact of it is, before that became casting directors, and we had stylists that moved in on the designers. You know, the model was models are no longer muses. That's a huge thing to me.
I will say, though, I'm not even saying like 2-3 years, within a year at least, ever since I decided to take real control of like my decision and how the styling, casting and everything looks, I find one of the reasons why we cast certain models, like a majority of the models, are people I find inspiring, that I've had a personal relationship. I'm not saying they're my best friends, but what they do, what they believe in, it's become like a very important thing for me, you know? And so, I mean, in terms of, while we're talking about this, like, you know, diversity, inclusion, and everything, I'm quite interested in this like whole like publishing world, and like how do how do you deal with, this might be a difficult question, so feel free to ignore it if you don't want to answer, but how do you deal with brands that are completely against your ethos? Or like what, you know, and there have been recent controversies with like big houses, big houses, and like
because they said advertisers, because they're the advertisers, you have to understand how we deal with them.
So how do you, so like, because you know, here's the thing, at the end of the day, yes, you know, it is a struggling industry, also like, you know, fashion is going through different times, and how do you, I'm just generally curious about like, how does it work?
I will say, for one brand in particular, I'll just say who it is, Dolce.
Yeah.
I have said to my staff, won't support them.
Yeah.
I think that if it's something that I feel strongly enough about that they truly just philosophically are not, you know, on the same page with us, I'm kind of happy doing that. I think it is hard though, and it's hard, and I thought about this a lot in terms of, you know, does every brand, does every founder have to agree exactly with you? Otherwise, does that mean that, you know, you can't do anything on them? It is becoming a very tricky world, and I think like social media is definitely not helping because we're definitely in like this cancel culture. Of, like, you know, a brand does one thing and it's like, you are canceled. And I think we do have to be a little bit more flexible because everyone has to be given an opportunity to mess up and then, you know, ask for forgiveness, and then whether or not you forgive them right away is up to you. But
I don't think you have to wait for them to be forgiven or that, but I do agree with you in that sense that you, I think as a position that you're in, that you can, that could be part of your editorial. You know, because you have to educate people. You know, along the way, you never think just because they have all brand new luxury that they all know the answer. They're humans.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'll give you an example also. So there have been a couple of beauty brands who I won't mention, but who have had cultural appropriation controversies. So what I'll do a lot of times is I'll reach out to the brand, and after this happens, and people will reach out to me being like, did you see this? Can we cancel them now? And I'm like, hold up. So I reached out to them saying, if you guys ever want to talk to me and like run, you know, show me your campaign, I'm happy to look at stuff, give you feedback. I can explain to you why people think that this is cultural appropriation. So I've had a couple of the brands reach out and be like, we'd love for you to meet our CMO. And I think like it's all stuff that's happening behind the scenes. But I feel like anything that I can do where I'm just getting my own opinion. Like I'm certainly no arbiter of what I think is right or wrong, but like I think that having those conversations is really helpful. Because in a lot of times those brands are not touching anyone.
I mean, I completely agree with you. You know, dealing with any of those kind of gracefully is always the way to go. However, there's a part of me also. When did it become our job to tell the white folks, you know, what they need to do? I'm not trying to, like, you know, there's a part of me which does that. You know, there's a thing, and, you know, I'm just bringing up the thing.
I don't blame you.
But the thing is, there's a part of, I always say this. No, go ahead.
Okay, so I think it's a little different for me because I think that I come off as like, maybe I should try with her. So people usually don't with me a little bit, but I do feel like when I've like had to do with brands and they do something that I'm like, why would you think that we're going to support that? I do feel like it's not my job to educate them on like why this is racist. Like obviously you should know that, but I do think a lot of times what I've done in the past that has been successful is say, look, like you obviously need help. So what you can do is hire me and I can consult and I can help you actually figure out like how this brand can be successful in a way that is inclusive of people in a smart way that actually makes sense. Like I don't think it's like I agree, I think the cancel culture is like it's a little intense a lot of times, and a lot of times like we'll know the PR people for that brand and the PR people are like, what? Like why would you do that? And you know people behind the scenes that are part of that are also equally as mortified when things happen. But I do feel like, I mean, I'm not about to sit here and like tell you like, hey, you shouldn't do that. But I do feel like a lot of brands now, it's like, I can tell that they had good intentions maybe when they came out with some collection that was like size inclusive and it's actually not. But I'll have a conversation with them and be like, hey, if you're actually going to do this, like invest money into this, hire the right people and do it this way so that you don't make a fool of yourself and so that there are more options out there for people and that, you know, you don't have to like keep linking out to the same 3 brands and market stories. Like,
well, I think all three of you are saying what you're saying, and especially what you just said. And you're right. It's not everybody's position to help educate. In my life, that is my position. So I don't expect the designer to go out there and try to educate the world, nor
It was just a statement, just a little.
No, it's true. No, you're right about that, though. You know, you can sit back suffering sometimes from the idea that you feel just your hands are tied. And what do you say? But for me, it's like so it's so my cross to bear. So in this particular case, for editors in chief, they have to walk a very thin line. You can't be gangster when you're trying to really bring in. No, you really can't. You can say that you're youth, but it will come back again. No, you can be a little gangster, but you better make sure you're right. Because I'm telling you something, you have to be really smart, and the part of it is knowing the art of war, and it's not a light thing to treat everything so lightly, like, you know, oh, why should I do? You know, in your youth you can say that, because I mean, everybody, every millennium is just so thin-skinned. I mean, I am shocked. I cannot even say anything or do anything without them going, they have dreadlocks, how dare he! And it's, you know, and me, I come from a world of creativity, so I come from places where everybody just used the world of what we saw, and we worked off it and did things.
But you do understand, I mean, you do understand the dreadlocks particular issue is when a black woman or a black man is wearing it, it's considered, like, you know, whatever, like, not looked down as something beautiful, and then when a white woman is doing that, it's celebrated as this amazing, edgy, and I have a problem with that. Do you know what I mean? When it's like that, I don't have, because as I said, grew up in Singapore, lived in Nepal, lived in India, like in London, Australia, and I came here, so I have like cultural references, right? But I think that particular, I mean, I'm just giving you an example. There are others also like that. So I just want to make sure that, you know, while I think it's going to be a couple of years before we get to a place where we are able to share with like our cultures and ideas with respect. But right now, I think it is important that, you know, we stick to like what and you know, call out. I don't necessarily agree with the decibel and like the loudness of it, you know, but I do think it is important to have this conversation, to call me out, to call out the designers, publishers, and everything. I think it becomes I guess in that way we're educating each other.
Yeah, it's not so much calling out as having a discussion.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what I wanted to do here.
Discussion,
yeah,
you know.
Yes, for sure. So I think we can open up to. Am I good with that? I have all the questions. I just want to make sure, you know. All right. So how are you guys doing? You need water?
Feel it.
All right. So yes. Do you want to moderate that? Will you please? So why don't you just get up, stand up, and please think of your name so we know.
I'm Wendy. I am a white, unfashionable boomer. While you guys are talking, I have like comments that you can whatever. I thought Michelle Obama and Becoming, because I learned a lot from her about your experiences.
Yes.
For you, I was thinking Yves Saint Laurent, always doing the Russia collections, appropriating. Yes, appropriating other people's. Other cultures' styles, and it was amazing. It was accepted.
Of course.
Because we were intelligent back then.
Yes. I'm wondering.
Well, no, yes, also.
Not sensitive.
But it was also
Creative.
Yes, we were creative. We were, you know, it was a different world. But also, minorities and people of color were not in position of power to question that.
Yes,
so that
I'm
was
saying it's an interesting.
No, wait a minute. Hold up.
I mean, that. Yeah. Am I going to get a phone call tomorrow?
I'm going to get a 98. The fact of it is when you don't, you're right there. You're on point. I appreciate what you said. The experience of reading about someone else's experience gave you lots of awareness, and recognizing the fact when Mr. Saint Laurent would lift and do things for his inspiration. When I'm in Morocco, I live for Mr. Saint Laurent. I live for Yves. Every village I go through, I think of him. So, to me, there were a lot of blacks working in fashion back in my day. And we didn't all go on, stand out there in line and get mad.
No, I wasn't talking about
No,
getting.
not you.
Yeah,
I'm talking to him.
Yeah.
You are on point. I'm over here. I just want to say that to you, to him, that he says there's nobody that were darks that could say something. They were in power. We were in power.
Okay.
And we didn't
I
have
stand
any
corrected.
And I hate to hog always, but I have a question for Lindsay. I'm wondering, you're a are you a millennial or are you like another
Yeah.
letter?
I'm a millennial, but not really. I'm
Okay.
45.
So,
She's a millennial.
and I saw Anna Wintour walking out without her sunglasses, and is she a mentor to you? I'm
Yeah.
wondering how that works.
Honestly, it's been really incredible. I think I've had really, really amazing bosses and really amazing, just that have been the most incredible to me. I think, ironically, when I started in fashion, I really thought, like, I really wanted to work at Essence. I really wanted to work at Ebony. I was like, man, like, I just see it for myself. It never happened. I applied a million times, never happened. But I always had the most incredible, mostly white bosses, and it's been like people that I still talk to all the time and text me and make sure that I'm eating and sleeping and doing all those things. And so, I mean, I think the mentorship part is so key. We both have weeklies with Anna, and she comes and checks in and makes sure we're good, and I am forever grateful.
Anyone else? Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
You know, white.
Okay.
Yes.
Do I need to stand up?
No, you don't have to stand up.
What?
I'm really tall, so I might like.
That's
I just have a question. I know you guys shared your stories getting into the fashion industry, but someone who's from a tiny town, I just moved here. What do you recommend, like getting your foot in the door? Like now that I'm here, what's next?
What do you want to do?
But both of your expressions were the same.
We are going to do karaoke after.
You two versus me.
So I'm kind of similar. I know I want to be in the fashion industry. I like the fact that women have this power. I think we've kind of lost it a little bit.
Okay,
I like that grasp of like maybe changing. It's not necessarily,
okay.
it's not, sometimes women wear the clothes, but I feel like sometimes
What do
the
you
clothes,
want to do?
I want to be in the fashion industry.
No, that's not what we're doing.
Anything to get like journalism, PR, journalism, more of the more behind the scenes type of situation. I'm just curious on getting the foot in the door, like how you guys mentioned.
I mean, there's so many ways. My advice to you would be to think about, because you're kind of flexible on what you want to do, think about companies or brands that you might want to work for.
Okay.
And I'm betting, even though you just moved here, you now know all these people here. Like, it is about who you know. And so if you were like, what we were talking about before, like, I didn't move here having contacts, but you learn to kind of hustle, and like, you know, you'll meet someone here who's like, oh, my friend works at this brand or whatever. And like, that's the greatest foot in the door, is just knowing somebody. And just like, literally, you gotta just, if you're trying to get your first job, like, reach out to 10 people in order to get like that one interview.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, I'll answer that too.
Yeah, right.
If you may not know anyone, since you don't know anybody, let's go with the second idea. You don't know anybody.
No.
So now you have to really do the footwork, fingers. You have to go on and start looking and seeing calling numbers of companies, of anything that you think you might want to, and just call and see, and go in as an intern. You're not going to get paid right away, but you're going to get in.
Are there still internships in most of fashion besides
Yes.
publishing?
We all want a schlepper.
Yeah.
We all want someone to come in and help,
Yes.
and they may not give you like, I still paid my intern or did a little something. They don't even pay anybody anymore, but they still will get your services. But at least it gets you in to see what you like and don't like.
Yeah.
I will say, like, the real bummer in most of the big publishing companies is that they've done away with the internship programs. And I actually think one of the big dangers is it does make it harder to break in, because then the only way that you can break in is because you know somebody.
Right.
No, that's true. I mean, my first break was in itself was my internship at Donica, and I didn't know anyone. There was just like one spot open, and I think 20 or 25 of us had applied. The interview was supposed to be the next day. I went the day before and just like sat in front of the door, and they said, "Can I just meet with the internship person?" And then they let me in. They were like, "Who is this person?" I met him, and so I got it, and the next day they called it. My friends, you know. So basically, I went a day before the interview. So I was just a hustler.
You can do it. It's New York.
Yeah, exactly.
This is New York, and anything's possible in New York.
Yes.
Do I stand up?
Sure, why not? And in your name?
My name is Elisa. I'm from Malaysia.
Oh wow.
I'm currently an intern at Marc Jacobs. And I
Okay.
work super hard from that little city, Kuala Lumpur, all the way here.
Good for you.
So, but here I realized that I'm representing a bigger thing because at that point I just kind of like, I'm a creative, I want to do this. I'm a creative, I want to do this. I never kind of associated myself with a Muslim woman or anything at all, and that got me here. But when I came here, I was associated with that. I want people calling me out that at first I was like, oh wow, this is New York.
Yeah.
But now I feel like I want to be that woman who's walking that door.
Yeah.
So at times I am an intern, so at times you do feel powerless or something like you don't have your voice in. So at that point in life, and I think we do go through that every day, even when you're up there. When you feel you're powerless, so what do you say to yourself personally?
Oh, that's a good one.
That's a good one.
Really, when you feel powerless, what do you say to yourself at that moment?
Yes.
Okay. Words from my little daughter. At some point, wait, I didn't finish it. Oh, there's something you said earlier that was really wise. At some point you said at some point you stopped caring. You can't do that yet because you're not there. And you are visible, you know. You really do have to, at some point, you have to do mantras. You know it's like making prayers, but you do have to tell yourself a story every day to get yourself where you need to go. It's like running track. You know, I'm going to win. I'm going to win. I'm going to win. And you keep saying that and smiling at yourself no matter what anybody says. I'm Muslim. No one ever knew it. I keep saying it all my life. They ignore me. But I don't look like it, I guess. I don't know what I do. But at the end of the day, that's what you must do. Just say, I'm going to win. I'm going to smile every time you say it. It's the sweetest thing.
And also, I would say, if anything, also to realize sooner than later that you're not the only one. You know, you're not alone, truly. And that, I think, was very empowering for me. As growing up in the Fatherland, when I came to America, I was excited about how diverse the culture was. I was also, this was a place where I was made very aware of my race, you know.
Other stuff. So while we do say like stay hungry, I like to tell people stay hungry but not thirsty. Like, like the work. And I tell my staff like I'm about the work. Like I'm not here to be thirsty. I'm not here to be like that. And I think when you keep that in your mind, you'll be fine.
That's a good one.
Do you understand that?
Yeah.
Hi, Joan Cargill here. I've been around for a while. Magazines, Mirabella, a little bit of everything. And yeah. Nice little dashing about. And I'm curious because I'm part magazine and entering digital. I haven't heard from you wonderful women how you've had to transition for the revenue part of the business. Because when you said newsstands don't matter, how do you deal with what does matter and not
as much?
Well, you know what I mean. The revenue pressure.
Yeah,
the
it's
revenue
this is very sort of inside baseball with publishing. But I think that what drives me a little bit crazy with publishing nowadays is that everybody talks about print and digital. And I'm like, it's not just print and digital though. There's social media, there's video, but then there's also, the great thing about Allure is that we're very diversified from the revenue side with a lot of other businesses too. So we have our Allure Beauty Box, and I think that what I was saying before, like about the Bruce Whitney, right? Like way back in the day, you had your magazine and that was it. And now, as an editor-in-chief, you're a business person. Like you truly, I really think of myself as a CEO. And if you're really thinking about like the whole business, and we are not just 3 years ago, I needed to transition Allure from being just Allure magazine to Allure a media brand, but now truly we are Allure just the brand. And I think that in a lot of ways, I think most brands are doing the same thing, like within fashion too, that everyone now is a content creator, they're creating documentaries and videos and everything.
And just to add to that, newsstands still pay, and digital world still isn't. You don't make, your revenue is not going to come from the digital world. That's the difficult thing too. As it is growing, you can't ignore it.
Okay. So hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. So my question is for Bethann, but we can also open it up to the rest of you all. So I hear in the beginning you all talked a lot about like history and like the industry being cyclical, and what you said, Bethann, about you all had your own little island. And I find myself like really romanticizing sort of like those days. Even though I wasn't alive, somehow I just feel like, for a creative, I'm a writer, so I love writing. And so for me, going even back to social media, the artist now has to produce for your followers, like, your following. But thinking about the industry and also how times, I guess, in some ways may repeat themselves, do you ever think that the island will
Never,
reemerge?
never. It's gone.
A different kind of island.
No, it's gone. It's gone. No, it really is. It really has gone. It's really, if you've lived it, it's something to behold and you can hold in your heart. And you'll always remember because you come from it, and that's your background. And if you lived it, you're old enough to not worry about what you all have to live with now. It's like moving to New York City and having a rent-controlled apartment or a rent-stabilized apartment. That's it. Now you're part of the fair market. It's over because it can't go back because now everybody's involved. Way back there, my God, me got there because she's way back there.
I have a rent-controlled apartment. On 28th Street. Okay, so my question is, what about women over 60? I see like a handful that are always recycled. Are we gonna, Bethann,
Yes.
you are gorgeous.
Yes.
I don't see enough of you.
What'd you say? You said they don't say what?
I don't see enough of you out there.
Oh, well, everything, look, even when people wanted me to do like a television show, I always wanted to hire someone that I thought could be my look, but not me. I'm always advanced. I'm so weird. I believe in the movement of the culture. I don't believe that I should be sitting on TV. I should be producing it and getting someone young to be Bethann. You know what I mean? So I don't expect that we are going to be still out there unless we've had it and we keep reinventing ourselves. There's only a few people who can do that, right? Now, you're talking about as a model or you're talking about as an entity?
I'm talking
Anything, right?
about women over 60
The visibility.
reinventing themselves. There's a lot of people who are, but they're not being shown.
Yeah. Oh, see, so it's visibility. So it is visibility. It's
Yeah.
not
Yes.
behind the scenes. It's visibility.
Visibility.
Yeah.
What she's saying, correct me if I'm wrong, basically, whether it's in publishing or fashion or something, it's the same roster of
Yes.
women being used again and
Yes.
again and again.
Yeah.
Well, fashion industry is lazy. I'll tell you this much. That's how we are.
But I think we're talking about
Yeah.
in general. You're talking about just in general, right?
Yeah, Hollywood, media.
Like all of us, because it's very, because
If you think about how many women over 60 are in beauty ads, like
Yeah.
it's the same.
and it's also about this idea of like, taking a risk. If you know, like,
It's like
you
May
can-
Musk. It's like,
Yeah.
I think we're just ignoring them. I think they're trying a little bit. I think that you're right in that sense. It's everything is celebrity, if anything. So if you'll see older women in their over 50 for sure doing that. I don't worry about it. I don't really care. But you're not wrong because some people need to see things that reflect them.
Yeah.
I just never was that kid. I never need to see a black girl on the cover of something so I can feel good, so I can get out there and do it. I never needed to have something to show me who I was. So, I'm really odd in that shit. And the fact of it really is that I am someone who want to live my life really well and move on. I don't want to be where she is. I don't want to be that. I want to be that rent control and rent stabilized. Because what we are is something so special. I bet you even get a discount at the movies.
I'm glad I did.
And I'm proud of
But
that.
I do want to
You
see
can't have it both
older
ways.
women being represented.
I know
do.
that's important. You're not
I
wrong.
do.
I'm just someone who doesn't
Yeah.
mind if they do all the work.
That's why you're special. That's why you know who you are. But majority of the people, I would say, do need it.
Self-reflection.
Yeah, I remember growing up. Like I remember growing up and turning the pages of magazine and no guy looking like me and questioning my own.
Cameron?
Cameron.
See, he didn't really grow up.
No, I didn't grow up here. I didn't grow up here, right?
Yeah,
So the thing is, one of the reasons when Crazy Rich Asians was coming out, the studio had reached out to me and they wanted me to show, look at the film and for the screen. And then I did that, and I reached out to Michelle and all these other Asian designers, Asian editors, simply because I knew what it felt like to turn the pages of magazines or movies and not be looked at desirable, or like anything like that. So I remember feeling that, and I said to myself, fortunately I'm in a position of privilege and power and whatever it is that I'm able to change that slightly. And that's when we had this conversation, like in initial. And so I think, you are, as I said, you are very lucky that you're in the position where you didn't need, let's say, affirmation. But a lot of us, we do. We do.
I felt that way about Asians, because I grew up always, in my agency, just loving. Steve and myself used to say I was the only person that had Asian kids in my agency. He used to call around and there was nobody. I couldn't understand. I'm so smitten with Asian.
We are the best. So
and Latinos. That's my other. So I would always have, but I understand that too, because I listen to so many girls coming up. When Lindsay and I had our talk on the phone, it was interesting to me that she was doing this article. And the article was really, I never even imagined it would be what it was. But she and I did have a great conversation, and she had to call many times to get me on the phone, so we were missing each other. But it was interesting that she was doing this story that I couldn't even imagine how big it would be, but reflecting a lot, right? So the fact of it is you do realize these things are very, very, very important for many, many, many reasons. Because it not doesn't make you and me and you feel better, it educates everyone.
For sure,
It educates everyone. That's why for me, making sure diversity, and when I talk diversity, I'm only talking racial diversity because that's my only campaign, is to make sure it consistently exists because it helps educate white people.
Yeah, I will say though with the aging thing, I do think it's changing. I definitely think, like you mentioned with beauty campaigns and other things, like we definitely, like Charlotte mentioned before, when we banned the term anti-aging, we put Helen Mirren on our cover, but it also was like so eye-opening to us at how much we were completely failing at truly being diverse about age and size and other things. And I think that's the thing. It's like, again, once you open your eyes to it, you're like, oh God, we're like doing a terrible job at that.
But then because then you're free to reflect society.
Yeah.
That's the difference. Before, when you're in a bubble, which is the island, you don't have to do that because it's all that elitist. But once you open that up, then you've got to reflect society.
Yeah, maybe one more. Yeah.
I just wanted to talk about, I still feel like with Asian Americans, I still feel like we're still always talking about politics. I feel like Hassan Minhaj is very successful, but we're still always referencing the Muslim ban, or we're still acting very reactionary towards things that, I feel like we're still caricatures in many ways, and we don't move beyond other people's thoughts about us. So my question is, how, as Asian Americans, can we just exist in a romantic comedy without it being called Crazy Rich Asians, or just be, on a show without it being called Patriot Act to prove that we're Americans?
I think in some ways we're we're in the infancy of where Asian Americans can go in this country, and I think there's still a very basic knowledge among most people of who we actually are, right? Because I think a lot of people, it's one group of, you're Asian American and you all are the same,
right?
Whereas if you really think about how different all means, like even China and Japan, the cultures are so different, not to mention all the other places. So I think that there just needs to be more quantity, I think, because there were so many eyes on Crazy Rich Asians, which there should have been. But I think then that one movie had to represent everything. And then everyone was like, well, what about this? What about this? But that's too much pressure on one project. So I think that the more, I feel like there's more projects now happening. The more that happens, it'll start to move in that direction, but I think it's just a matter of time.
And when you say about yourself, you having to have to identify, or you having to have to speak up, or, just sort of adjust within it,
Right.
The fact of it really is you really don't. That's the same thing with her.
Right.
You're bringing so much more to the table. You have to look at the other guy's ignorant.
And just not let it affect you.
You don't, definitely. You have to look at how much more beautiful you are, how much more chic you are. You have so much more going on because they really live in their little world. Their world is only the United States of America.
Yeah, right.
Keep that in mind. Where you come from, you've journeyed. Your family, even if you were born here, has so much more culture. So just know that, like she said before, you know more than they do. And keep that in your mind, and one day you'll tell them.
One last question, yeah?
Lindsay and Bethann. My name is Lakin. I was just wondering. Would you say Lindsay?
I like your cornrows.
Thank you so much. I was just wondering, in the Black community, among Black women, there's such a diverse range of looks. And so when I see girls like Yara and Zendaya on covers of magazines and being lionized, how do you feel when it comes to that erasure of like the darker skinned Black woman?
That's not.
Or like the woman who is not white dipped in chocolate.
You can go.
Chocolate.
No. That's Go ahead, girl. Then I'll tell you. No, you don't.
I mean, I hate when people say colorism isn't still a thing because it clearly is. And I think it's constantly a conversation that I'm having, whether it's like people that we're shooting or like, why is this, why is this light-skinned Black girl constantly in ads and only considered for these kinds of things, and why, like, I think it's just something that, for me, I find particularly really annoying because I think that people participate in that and they think like, oh, well, like, I'm checking a box by including a Black girl in this. It's like, no, but like, you just included like the same 3 Black girls, right? That's not the same thing. And so I think it's just, honestly, for me, always a conversation of like, how can we push ourselves further to think about this in a different way and make sure we're including women of color from all different backgrounds that have all different kinds of voices. A lot of times, like, just being transparent, I think with celebrity, the hard thing, Michelle and I were talking about this in the car, is like, you deal with a lot of behind the scenes things where like, I may really like a certain celebrity who is darker skinned, but her management may not, they may be like, well, we're really like pushing her to like look like this or to like only be this and that kind of thing. And so it's hard a lot of times, even in positions of power, like, you want to put people on, you want to do certain things, but like at the end of the day, it's really like, I'm trying to push it on all ends and I'm trying to elevate all those voices. I'm doing the best that I can in that, but it's a lot of red tape. It's a lot of like politics people don't want to talk about in that colorism. So.
I don't, for me, I'm so happy that someone's of color. I don't care what color they are. I don't have the colorism thing because I'm a senior citizen. And the fact of it is that for me, when I see what I'm looking at with the fashion model, that balances out all the little light-skinned yellow girls. So I think it's a great balance. If you see where she can't get someone, well, God bless Zendaya. God bless the other little girl. I mean, I'm so proud of all of that. I can't, this is our problem. This is our problem, you know what I mean? We need to get over that and just keep it moving. I mean, I know it's hard for you all because you're intelligent college girls and smart, but for me, it's just like they're good. But look at the dark West African girls that are coming out right now. They're so dark, it's scary.
They're exoticized.
Okay? What'd you say?
They're exoticized. I mean, I feel like they're like
Fetishized.
right there.
You think that?
Yeah, like what? I mean, in my opinion, I mean, I think you see more of the white girls dipped in chocolate.
And I talked to like Ebony Davis is a good example of this. I know I say this. So like Ebony is a good example because she's like my color and she all the time gets like, she's not light, but she's not dark skinned. Yeah, and she's like a brown, but they'll be like, oh, but like, where are you from? Like, what are you? And it's like, I'm just Black. Like, and I feel like a lot of times.
Yeah, we've had that all these years.
Yeah, and I feel like that's what a lot of times that's the problem because it's like that's not good enough. It's like you kind of have to be on that spectrum or that spectrum.
These fashion models that you see in the magazines right now, they're exoticized. I mean,
they're have like Ida Jones and
yeah.
I mean,
Dawn and
if I may, like, I do.
Well, I want to hear her.
Yeah.
I need to understand this. You're saying that these girls are exoticized. How is it exoticized? Because back in the day when Iman came along, they would say to her, where are you from? You're so exotic. And she'd say, well, I'm not a papaya. How do you see them as exotic? I don't mean
the mainstream. I mean, I don't think you see a darker skin. I mean, with the exception of maybe Duffy.
No, I can name them. Wait a minute.
Oh, okay.
My work is not being. Wait a minute.
Okay, I celebrate all Black Girl Magic, but I mean, I feel like.
But that's your experience.
Is the token like?
No, Alex, you think this way. You not only think it, you're stuck in it. You share it. You need to be in your neighborhood. I need to help you change that because you need need to know more information. You can't speak on something if you don't have the information.
Melody.
All right. So on that note, which is I think a great part of the thing was to have an intergenerational conversation and exchange. So if there's any last words you guys want to say to them, and then I think we're done with Q&A. Sorry, and because it's they have to go. Yeah. Or like any
Advice?
yeah, sure.
I would say take chances. I think that throughout my life when I was younger, I never considered myself to be a risk taker. But I think nowadays, like taking good calculated risks is really worth it. And what this girl over here was saying before, it's like you just don't know sometimes. And like my mantra, I think when I'm having those moods is really just everything's gonna turn out okay. I think that you only kind of discover that after time. That I look back on like the past 10, 20 years or whatever, and like in those moments of where I just remember things going so badly and thinking, how am I ever gonna pull myself out of this? And then you look back and it's like the smallest little blip of like nothing. The thing, like once you go through a couple of those things, you realize like once you do look in the mirror and you're having a hard time, it's gonna pass.
I like that.
Yeah. Mine's gonna be a little opposite of what you said earlier. So
I'm sure it would be.
I think that honestly, when I was growing up in Wisconsin, I always loved Sex and the City. I always loved Girlfriends. Like those are my shows. I watched every episode all the time. Ridiculous. And I always like wished that Girlfriends would have been put on the same like platform and given as much love as Sex and the City. And was just those were really my inspirations for a lot of things. And would put up pictures on the wall. And my mom came in my room one day and said, she was like, well, like why do you have all the ones in Sex and the City? And we talked about the fashion, tried to break it down to her and explain to her, and she was like, well, if you really want to do this, like you need to be what what you need and what you see. And like I think now, when I started to get into the industry, she was like, it feels like you're lost, like it feels like you don't really know what you're doing, and it feels like you're in the weeds a lot of times, like what am I doing, like is this actually matter? Yeah. And then she reminded me of that day a couple of years ago and told me to be what I needed when I was younger. And I feel like I've kept that advice with me, and I think about that every day because I feel like when I was putting those pictures up on my wall, what I wanted and all the content that I wanted, like those are things that I'm trying to create now. And so I feel like if you can, use your position or use your platform to create things that you need to see, whether it's to uplift you or to encourage you or to make you feel special in this world, like that's what you should do.
Yes, it's your inspiration. Yeah. I just want you all to do well. And you, I want you to just get some more information. But I'm very happy to have been here. I'm happy to be with Michelle and definitely little Lindsay over there because it's been really wonderful to know that they exist in this world right now. Anyone can. Everyone's not meant to be what some of us have become. None of you can say, oh, I want to be, but ambition and destiny is what gets us every place that we need to be. Sometimes if you can't be, don't fret. There's something else waiting for you. We're not all supposed to be the leader of the band. Sometimes you're supposed to pull the trophy horse.
Thank you, everyone.